just like Trevor, I met Alison through business. Um, we're both volunteers with the Federation of Small Businesses, and I met Alison at a volunteer conference in London. I didn't know she was a runner until we were sitting at the same table and we happened to mention running. And I then realized there was something exceptional about this person. And Alison didn't start running until she was a little bit older. And then she had one or two problems, some health problems, didn't let that bother her, kept on pressing through. And just through perseverance and just keeping going. And I don't know how she does it, because she keeps training all the time. She runs a very successful, demanding business, and she's just become a director of the Federation of Small Businesses. So she's a really, really busy person, but she managed to get the training in. So she puts us all to shame. So over to you, Alison.
Thank you for that. I'm not sure about that, Edward. I think you've set me up. First of all, you put Trevor on before me and his wonderful PowerPoints and his story, and then you go and read from your book. I mean, how unfair is that? And I must apologize to Harry and Cassandra that I couldn't join you this morning to hear your stories. I hope to hear them on the recording. I'm afraid my business took over this morning, and I had to deal with a client who had a sticky problem. So yes, I do run a business as well as doing my running, and I'm a grandmother, and I'm old, and you know, all those good things, but that's just the way life rolls. So when Edward asked me to speak, I thought, well, I'm looking at what the other people which I think the other people are speaking about, and I'm thinking, what can I speak about? You know, I mean, really, I'm just not that, you know, really impressive. I haven't run many races. I haven't won anything. You know, I'm just a woman who runs, really. And I thought, well, maybe I should talk about why I run. So I did prepare a few slides, which I'm going to put up, and they're not as great as Trevor's, I have to tell you. They're probably a bit more business-like, you know, because that's the world I live in. So bear with, and I'll just try and get my screen to work, and I'll tell you why I run. It's going to share my screen, and of course, why is it that when you share your screen, the instructions for the actual the bar along the top of your screen gets hidden by the instructions for Zoom? So bear with me a second, it's taking its time. Just about, there we go. Why do I run? Well, I have been asked that question quite a lot of times, and every time I have to pause and wonder again, because it sort of changes. And why did I run, and why did I start when I was 64? You know, people say to me, that's a ridiculous age to start running. Why on earth would you do that? Well, actually, I suppose I really didn't start when I was 64, because I was a very good athlete when I was at school. So I was a good track athlete, but I was born in 1950. So in 1950, women only ran as far as 880 yards. So I never really got anywhere. So even though I joined Aberdeen Athletics Club, I come from the north of Scotland. So I joined Aberdeen Athletics Club when I left school and I was at college, and I ran track events there, and then eventually I went on to run the ladies' miles at the Highland Games, and my claim to fame is I have run at the Highland Games that the Queen attends. She wasn't there that day, but I did run at the Highland Games in Braemar, and I did win, which was quite nice. But you know, I didn't really do much, because I had this feeling that I wasn't running far enough. And there were a couple of guys in the club, Stephen Taylor, who I actually ended up my boyfriend for a while, and another chap called Don Ritchie, both of which ran distances. And had I known then what I know now about ultra running, I probably would have tagged on a little bit more with them, because Don Ritchie went on to blaze a trail in ultras, running the West Highland Way, which is 96 miles, and he became quite a well-known long distance runner. And Steve too, both of them actually did that. So there was quite an interesting journey for me just to run with those guys, but there was nothing going on. And as a woman in the 1960s at that time, as it was in the early 1970s, there was nobody really doing anything in athletics up in the north of Scotland. Yes, the world was beginning to waken up to women running longer distances. In the US, the first woman to run the Boston Marathon, who almost got thrown out by some of the people who were running the actual marathon, not running physically, but running it as a business, the business of the marathon, tried to get rid of her, and 2 male runners stopped them doing that, and she finished, and she became the first woman to run. And I've gone and forgotten her name, Catherine Spicer, or it's a very difficult surname, but when she did that, that was groundbreaking, but it didn't really translate over into Scotland in the north, and so I just gave up. But I've always, throughout my life, really wanted to feel fit and healthy. But I'm kind of lazy, you know. I pick things up and I try them and then I drop them. I don't like the repetitious nature of things. And I just think, well, you know, I'm not interested. So I don't know why I stuck with ultras. And why do I want to compete when, you know, I really have very little chance of actually winning? Well, is it pretentious to call myself an athlete? I don't know. I think I feel like an athlete sometimes when I go out, and, you know, my head tells me I'm an athlete when I'm out training, but am I? I don't know. So there are a number of things that really, really get me going with the ultra running. And one of them's the challenge. I am competitive, there's no doubt about it. I'm competitive in business as well as competitive in running. I was competitive with my children when they were growing up, which is a dreadful thing to be, but you know, it's just the way I'm made, and I like to win. But winning doesn't necessarily mean coming first. For me, that challenge, you know, with ultras is to finish, and then to finish faster, and then maybe to become first in your age group, or maybe compete in a really tough race that's got tough entry requirements and even tougher climbs and technical trails. And that's what I am aiming at. I want to do the Ultra Trail Mont Blanc. It's 170 kilometers. I'm sure many of you have heard of it. It's a challenging race, but you have to have points for that. And I, at the moment, don't have those points. Lockdown hasn't helped. I suppose the other thing about the running is the joy. I mean, it is joyous to get outdoors. And Edward says, you know, I run just about every day. Or I don't necessarily run as hard every day because I've got 2 dogs and I take them out, and they tend to make me dawdle sometimes because they don't want to run anything other than intervals or fartlek, actually. I mean, they tend to be inconsistent, but I do run the dogs and I do go out every day, first thing in the morning, you know, 6 o'clock in the morning, and I love it. But getting out of the door on for a training run on a cold, wet morning in the UK is not that great. It's hard. And you really do have to, as we say in Scotland, gird your loins. You have to get out there and you have to say, I'm going to do it. Because once I know that I've started, I know that I'll do it and I'll finish. So it's getting that first foot out of the door. Once that foot is out of the door, off I go. And I do enjoy the time spent, mostly in solitude. I don't really train with anybody. There's a reason behind that. First of all, I am older, and so my speeds are not that great. And the people who are doing the races that I like, or the training for the races that I like, tend to start off a bit faster than me. It takes me at least 5 kilometers to get going. And even then, I could probably 10 kilometers before I'm really into my stride, which is one of the reasons I like doing ultras. But, you know, I love the fresh air and I love the scenery, and I even like the mud. And I was laughing to myself when Trevor said he wouldn't like going in a race in the rain. This winter, we had a phenomenally snowy day. I live in Wiltshire now, not in Scotland anymore. We had a phenomenally snowy day. And the joy of being able to get up and put on my wet weather gear and get out at 6 o'clock in the morning in the dark, in the snow, with it really coming down on me, it was just unbelievable. It just made my day, and I absolutely loved that. And I was soaking wet when I came back. My feet were wet, my body was, you know, my raincoat, my face was dripping with water, but it was just lovely. And I was out for 2 hours, which, you know, was quite a bit of time for a snowy day, but it's like that. And I think the other thing about the joy is that ultra marathon races are pretty friendly too. Now, I've done a couple of marathons as training runs, and I do them in about 5 hours. I really don't like road running, and I really don't like the atmosphere as much as the ultras, because ultras really are friendly. And to Edward's comment about walking, you do walk a bit. If you're doing 100 kilometers, you do walk a bit in that time. And it's not necessarily, for me, necessarily all the hills. Sometimes it's a bit of the flat too, depending on how depleted I feel. And, you know, if I've got to eat something, I might not have as much energy. Thing about the ultras is no one ignores you. Most competitors have a cheery, encouraging word for you, and they even praise you when you pass. I mean, one of the best compliments I think I ever got when I was running, I overtook a couple of people in a wooded area running downhill, and I love running downhill. I absolutely love it. I just put myself, boom, and I go. I just really enjoy it. And so I was running downhill and I passed these people and I heard them say, look at the speed she's going. And I slowed slightly and I said, thank you. And he said, that's amazing. Keep going, you know, running downhill on this. And they're shouting after me. And these two were in the race as well, in theory, competing against me. And yet they were praising me and pushing me on, which was fantastic. And I was smiling for at least a mile afterwards. And what about that finish? I mean, really, the end of an ultra. I choke at the end of an ultra, and I never quite understand how most folks find the energy to run down the final stretch to the finish. You're tired, you're dehydrated. There have been moments when you wanted to quit, and then there it is, that finish, and you've been dragging your feet up to this point, and there's people waving and clapping no matter what time of the night it is. It always amazes me, if you finish the race at 3 o'clock in the morning, there'll be at least 20 people there clapping you through the gate at the end, which I think is incredible. And when I think of that, as I said, I get this lump. Those finishes are so emotional, but they're absolutely joyous. And I also think that the support you get, I mean, I have the most amazing support from my family and friends. I didn't think I would. Some people did say to me at the beginning when I started doing this, you must be mad, but it was a kind, you must be mad. It wasn't a nasty, you must be mad, or how stupid are you? It really was a supportive, you must be mad. And they've helped me. I mean, they've been with me. My husband particularly, he helps the planning. Trevor mentioned about planning. He's absolutely right. You do have to plan a long race. When you're running a 100-kilometer race, you need to know every twist and turn of that route, even if it's only on the map, because sometimes you obviously can't go to the race itself before you do it. But you know, it's an important thing to do all that planning and doing it. But having family and friends that support you, my two daughters support me, their partners, everybody, and the nice words I get. And I think the most amazing thing for me was a young New Zealand lass who has been cutting my hair since she was 21, and she's now 38. I discovered she was an ultra runner quite by chance. It was quite amazing. Which I was sitting in the hairdresser's chair, and the first race I did, I wanted to raise money, and I was talking about it, and she said, "Did you not know that I run ultra marathons?" And I said, "No." And so she became a fan of mine too, which was just so nice. So I say family and friends are really, really important. I think I've learned a lot. Well, I don't think I know so much about my body and my mind since I started running. You know, I wasn't that interested in those subjects before, even after I was ill, and I'll come on to illness and injury in a minute. But you know, I wouldn't claim I'm any kind of an expert, but I do believe that my body and my mind work together to fix myself, and I can do that, and that is extremely powerful. And it adds to my belief that to live on to my 80s and 90s, I am right to keep running. And even when some doctors have tried to discourage me, I want to be strong as I age. I want to be sharp-witted as I age. I want to be healthy as I age. I want to have plenty of energy as I age to play with our grandchildren, to keep my business going. I love my work too, and I'll mention that in a minute. And running helps me achieve all of this. There's absolutely no doubt in my mind that running does that. I think if I go back to my first race, like Trevor, I've raised money when I've been running, and my first race was all around raising money for the Friends of Charing Cross Hospital in London, where I was chairman of that charity for a bit. And I wanted to raise £2,000. That's back in 2015. And that's when I first did the Race to the Stones. So in 2015, the Race to the Stones is very close to me in Wiltshire. It's along the Ridgeway. It's a type of race. You can walk it, you can run it, you can half it and do it overnight, you know, an overnight stay, or you can do 50k at the beginning or 50k at the end. And it's a friendly, I wouldn't say easy race. It is easier than some of the others, but it's just a good one to start with, because it's got such a choice. And I ran most of the first 20k before moving into like a run walk scenario. But when I first started out planning for it, I'd actually planned just to walk it, because I didn't think I could run. And then about 4 to 5 months out, I thought, you know, maybe I could run this. I'd been working in San Francisco. I'd been walking around the hills in San Francisco, up and down Dale, when I was there, and I was getting fitter just doing that walking. And up till that point, I hadn't really done any running really. And certainly in my life, I had never run more than 5 kilometers. And so just the thought of running initially when I signed up for this, I thought, no, I'll be walking it. But as I don't know what happened, I just suddenly decided to switch in. And he said, you know what, I might run it. So I started training, and I did a lot of research into how to run a race that distance, how, you know, what I needed, the kit I needed, the food I needed, you know, all of those things before I did it. So running the first 20k, I probably set off a bit too fast, and I knew I shouldn't have done that, but it was a good thing for me. It got me going. And then a run walk scenario, and then I walked between 60 and 80k. So I had a 20k distance towards the end where I walked, but that actually stood me in good stead for the last 20k, because I was running that mostly alone, and in the dark, because it was quite late by that time. But I watched the sunrise over Avebury, and this way, Avebury's a bit like Stonehenge if you don't know of it. It's where there are stones, and you can see them in this picture here. And as I approached it, the sun was rising. And the good thing about the Ridgeway, of course, at that part was because it's local to me, I had practiced. So I knew every inch of that route. It was familiar. I trained on that trail. I knew every twist and turn from the A345 to Barbary Castle, and then from Barbary to Avebury. I knew every ridge in the trail and every hill. And that knowledge paid huge dividends at the end of 100 kilometers. The last 20k was the best. I knew I could finish. I was unafraid. I was refreshed from the 20k walking. And I still get another lump in my throat, really, about the end of that race, because it was the first time, and I ran down the stretch at the end. It took me 20 hours, which seems an immensely long time. Well, actually, it took me 19 hours and 58 minutes, if I'm honest. Not that I'm counting, but it was one of those races where you just kind of know that when you get to the end, you're going to burst into tears, because it was just so nice to finish and do it. And that was for me, was the start of wanting to do more. Most people, when they do that, they go, I'm never going to do it again. And then maybe 2 or 3 weeks later, they say, oh, you know what, I might sign up for the next one. I decided the minute I stopped, I was going to do it again. I'm going to do more of this. I really love it. And so I planned on training for other races, and I did, and I got into it. And that was 2015 and up to 2017. And I did a number of little smaller races, shorter races, as I say, for training. So half marathons and marathons and 10Ks, but they never really gripped me. I needed that distance to feel like I was competing. My favorite race of all the races I've done was the 53-mile fling race in Scotland over the West Highland Way. Now that's around Loch Lomond. It's a beautiful area. It was a fantastic race. It was hilly and difficult, and you scrambled over rocks, but it was such a good race for me, because I'd gone into it thinking, you must be out of your mind doing this because you're not fast enough. And I ended up finishing the race bang on the cutoff time. It was the first race I'd done with any cutoffs. It was a 15-hour cutoff time, and I arrived at 15 hours. I'd managed to get through all the cutoffs and managed to get there in the 15 hours, which again isn't very fast, but it was quite a tricky race. And so that's definitely my favorite one, and I just really enjoyed that. And I gave something back on that race, because I went the following year to volunteer to make sure that I could help other people in that race that enjoyed it so much. The worst situation I had was a DNF, and I think it was Lee was asking about, you know, what happens in terms of things, well, like failure. And I failed. I did not finish this race. It was a 100-mile race. I'd done the the fling race in the April, and this was a 100-mile race at the end of May, or round about that time. And I hadn't really realized how long an older athlete takes to recover. And I hadn't really planned that well enough. And I didn't feel very good at all in relation to that race. It was flat, it was along a canal, it was between Liverpool and Manchester and back again. I got as far as Manchester, I did 50 miles, but I just gave up. And that giving up was a revelation as well, because I didn't realize I could give up. I've never been somebody who gives up, but I did give up, and I learned from it. And what I learned from it was the fact that recovery is really important. And I'm not, much as I'd love to think I'm not 70, or I was, what, 67 then, I am, and I have to recover, and I have to respect my age, because as an older person, you have, your body is different, it's very different. I think, again, Trevor mentioned being a bit older, and knowing that there are things you can't do, but it's not just your muscle structure and, you know, building your muscles up, building your stamina up, your lung capacity. If you don't keep the breathing going, and your lungs don't take in as much air when you're older, oxygen when you're older, your food isn't as well processed when you're older, you don't take as much protein from the protein food. So all of that has to be taken into consideration. So you're not able, no matter how much I would like to think I can compete against a fit 30-year-old, I can't. I can compete against an unfit 30-year-old, but I can't compete against a fit 30-year-old. And so acknowledging that and understanding that and learning more about it is my challenge at the moment. And this is why I'm in this sort of healthy aging stage of life, looking at what is good. I've always eaten well. I've always, as I said, kept myself fairly fit, but it's looking at how that changes as you get older. And again, to Trevor's point about wanting to give, you know, to find out more about the older person and being an athlete, I have the same sort of goal that Trevor has about going on and helping older athletes deal with it. I think the final thing, well, not quite the final thing, almost the final thing, but about illness and injury. And I don't really want to go through all the things that have happened to me, but I will say that I have had two major illnesses in my life. I had cancer when I was 48. Breast cancer, and it had gone into my lymph nodes. I was running a business, and I knew I had to stay positive for that business because I had staff that depended on me. So I didn't tell anybody other than my family that I was ill. I had to go into hospital to have a breast removed, and I had to have chemotherapy and radiotherapy. I just pretended it didn't happen. My head said it didn't happen. I went along to all the appointments dressed as if I was going to a business meeting. I just didn't let it happen to me. But what I didn't realize until fairly recently, that I actually ran. And I know that sounds silly. I was on steroids for my sickness, and to combat all that, the drugs, and I just went into an automatic mode of going out occasionally. I lived in London at that time, and run around the river, as we called it, run around the Thames. So it was Chiswick Bridge to Kew Bridge, a 5K run, and I used to do that. And I didn't realize actually that that's how I got myself through. My mind worked really well with that, and it helped me get through the cancer. And then in 2017, which was actually worse than the cancer, I had a heart attack. Whoa, why on earth would I have a heart attack? I'm fit, I'm running races. They didn't know. I was atypical. It just wasn't something that I expected. I was fit as a flea. The remedies that they give you for a heart attack relate to people who are overweight, unhealthy, not doing any exercise. I was the complete opposite. So my fitness went into decline. So my physical fitness actually declined when and I know you say, well, you had a heart attack, but I don't mean that. I mean the fact that I was running so much, but then I lost my muscle tone, and because I had to, they stopped me from doing things. And I decided then that I had to get back to running no matter what they said. And so I took myself in hand, and I went to a heart specialist who actually was researching with a university young athletes who have heart attacks, and she took me on, which was good. And she told me I didn't need to worry. I could get out there. She checked me out on the treadmill. But I'd gone into a situation with the drugs they gave me. I went into a situation of depression for a year. And I just focused on work to get out of that. I went straight back into full-time, full-on business to get through that. And that did get me through. But I did learn things about illness and injury that I would say to you now. There's more than one route to getting better, and the mind and the body work together. And it's the mind that overcame my body problems and still does to this day. You have to stop and breathe and reassess. So stop, say to yourself, what is happening, and reassess what you can do. And then when you go back to running, as I did, you don't over anticipate what you can do. Just take part, take that first step, just go and try, and you'll be amazed at what you can achieve. In fact, I won't dwell on that. I think I just briefly want to mention about my business and running. So Edward mentioned that I had a business, and I have had since I was 36. I sold my first business because I wanted to, when I was 60 actually, and I decided I wanted to do less. I'm actually doing more now than I did when I was running the business, but I no longer have employees, and that took a lot of the stress away from me. So what does my running do for me? Well, you can see there, it gives me energy, it gives me a clear mind, and it gives me that endurance. I run ultramarathons. It gives me endurance. It keeps me going. And I think that's really, really important. So I think, with a nod to my South African friends on the call, my running is like a bowl of nachos. And you're going to ask me why I know what nachos are, aren't you? Well, my husband's a South African, so there you go. But my running is spectacularly fruitful sometimes. It just is a joy, and everything works. Sometimes it's really dry and tasteless and all shriveled up and not good at all. Mostly I feel it's bright and bold. I like what I do, and I really enjoy doing it. Sometimes those pips and leaves trip me up. I fell a couple of weeks ago as I was running downhill too fast. But, you know, that's me. I run too fast sometimes. But what is my running? It's always around when it's gloomy. Why do I run? I feel happy when I run. Thank you.
Thank you, Alison. Wow, yeah, inspiration coming from all our speakers today. So amazing, amazing story. And yeah, I'm gasping for breath. I'm going to hand it straight over to Ed, because I know he wants to add in.
That was that's brilliant.
Thank you.
But I think, you know, what a lot of people will take comfort from is that, and something you said almost just in passing, it's very hard to get out of the door. And I think people think that just because we run a lot, it's easy. It's not easy. Actually, my last blog post on the Trail Running Man website was about the fact that it never gets easier. You learn to cope better, and you learn to get out of that door. So yeah, I think all of us can identify with the fact that actually getting out of that door is really hard. I've never quite managed the 4 o'clock, although in the morning, although Trevor's daughter came up with a brilliant idea, and it's something I'm going to do, which is start a run on every single hour of the clock. So in the summer, I'm going to start at 1 o'clock, etc. So, but inspirational, and the fact that you didn't let problems get in your way, and I think that's a great business lesson, isn't it? And you and I had a talk the other day about business, and I just think you're going to get lots of stuff done. So any questions?
Hope so. No, it's interesting about the getting out of the door in the morning. It really is hard sometimes. I mean, and comment that Lee made earlier about pain as well. How do you get through things like pain? I've been quite lucky. I don't have a lot of pain when I'm running. I can have a lot of pain after I run, but I don't have a lot of pain when I'm actually running. So my feet don't hurt. I don't get blisters. I don't seem to suffer from too many aches and pains then, but certainly afterwards, yeah.
Trevor Lee, yeah, you wanted to add in there?
Yeah, can I ask a question? What about eating? What's your favorite sort of eating arrangement when you're doing a long run?
Okay, so my eating is actually all around something called Tailwind Nutrition. I don't get any money for advertising it, by the way, but Tailwind has seen me through. It took me a long time to find it, and it's a combination of rehydration and protein together, really, and carbohydrates, and it gives you that energy. So what I tend to do, a bit like you, I program myself. So I tend to sip as I'm running. So every 15 minutes, actually, I have something to slurp. I have the bottles here and I just, quite inelegantly slurp along. And I take in quite a lot of liquid through the time. But every 10K, I would take a ½ liter of this Tailwind. And I almost stop to take it because I prefer to actually have the full whack at one time rather than sip that, and then that gives me the energy. The other thing, I'm a banana fan, so I have a lot of bananas, and I pick banana when it's a race. I pick up a lot of bananas on at the various checkpoints. And the third thing I always carry with me is crystallized ginger. So as you get towards 50K, if you haven't eaten properly, and this is me, I've never hit the wall, but you can start to feel a little sick. And so that ginger gets me back on track again. I take a couple of ginger cubes, and that makes me feel a bit better because there's a bit of sugar there and the ginger settles your stomach a bit. And then I move on to taking more. I make myself take more food. And the worst thing I've ever taken, which now I shudder to think that I actually even took it, was a cup of soup, which is full of salt, but that's what my body needed. And I had to get that from the checkpoint because I didn't have anything with me, but it was such a hot day. And to your point about different weather, Trevor, that was such a hot day, and which is unusual for the UK. It was just too much. And I had just been sweating buckets and I hadn't realized how much I'd sweat. And so I had to have the cup of soup to recover. But I'm not a sweet tooth, so it's really difficult. I can't do gels. I can't do those jelly beans. I can't do all the sugary things. It has to either be a savory, like a savory food, or something like a drink that's not got a flavor in it. So I use the unflavored Tailwind, and sometimes I might put ginger in that. Sometimes I might put something else in it, but I don't like sweet stuff. But it's really individual, don't you think?
Very much so, yeah. I have my own flapjack I make, which has got chopped up dates in it. It's got maca powder in it. It's got flaxseed in it, chia seeds, raisins, all sorts of stuff. And I've been practicing eating that over the last few training runs. Just getting used to eating on the run, really. Yeah,
that's the thing. The one thing I would say is practice, 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 practice. Because not practicing with food means that you don't actually know how you're going to cope. And so you never do, a 7-hour run, or at least I don't ever do a 7-hour run as a training run. That would be ridiculous. I do 2.5 hours and an hour and a half back to back. I do, most I've ever done, I think, on a training run is a marathon, to be honest. So you don't actually have that chance to know what your body is going to do beyond 30 miles. So it's quite interesting, really, but you have to practice anyway.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'd agree with the bananas thing. When I'm doing long races, I take whole dried bananas. They're not those sugary chips you get in health food stores. These are just whole bananas that have been dried. They look a bit like a cat's turd, but I just wrap them up in a bit of cling film, stick them in my shorts, and I've got a whole banana in my pocket. And it's really good for the potassium in it. And the ginger's a great idea. It's supposed to also be a slightly anti-inflammatory, but I think
definitely.
You need to be taking it regularly to get the anti-inflammatory effect. Anyone else got any questions for Alison?
And Nadia wanted to add in something there.
Hi, Nadia.
Hi, Alison, Estienne. You touched very briefly on a subject which is, to me, very important, the DNF.
Yeah.
I've been running 40-something years and done various things. You must read your body, and a DNF isn't the end of the world.
No.
If your body is saying enough is enough, listen to it. And this whole got to get there, got to get there. Don't give yourself a permanent damage to get to a finish line. Just read your body. And if you don't finish, you don't finish. Stop.
Yeah, exactly.
Too many runners will actually damage themselves permanently to get to that finish line. I've had many DNFs, not many, hopefully not that many, but there are stages. I mean, Western states, they got to the stage where, no, it wasn't going to happen. You know, you just got to deal with the DNF. And I think it's a subject that a lot of runners should realize, that it's intelligent to DNF sometimes.
Yeah, the DNF was quite an interesting story for me, that one, because the team that were, you know, the race director, GB Ultras company, they were very kind to me because I was the oldest person in the race, and they'd been rooting for me to get it finished. You know, they really wanted me to finish, but as I said, I got the halfway mark, but it was a split race, so they very kindly gave me the halfway medal, the 50-mile medal, so I still got a medal for it. I just didn't get the 100-mile buckle, which is the one I was after. But the DNF was, you're right, it was definitely a lesson. It was definitely, my body is not liking this. But the thing about that, of course, was what I didn't know was that a month or so later, I was going to have a heart attack. So I didn't really, I think my body was definitely telling me to stop.
I think Esther makes a really good point there about the DNF. There's a lady called Claire Maxted. She's a youngster, and she's got a YouTube channel called Wild Ginger Films. And she ran the Cape Wrath Ultra, and she didn't finish it. But she calls DNF did not fail. And Alison said she learned from that experience. And Claire also says she learned from that experience. And I think if we learn from our experiences, and it took me a long time, but my first DNF was the New Forest Marathon. I was training for the London to Brighton. I got halfway through the New Forest Marathon. I was really struggling. I had a cold. And I was thinking, you idiot, why are you trying to finish this race when actually your goal is the London to Brighton? It's not important to finish this race. And it was so empowering once I'd given up to know that I was in control of what I did. And Estienne's right, you don't want to give up too many times because it then becomes a habit. But yeah, I think it's important to realize that life is, and Cassandra made the point when she was thinking about giving up on her chemo, you know, life and her children were important. And you know, those are the things to think about. But I think Lee wants to come in.
Yeah, I'd love to ask a couple of questions, Alison. I think there are two things that, well, there were a couple of things, many things that struck me, but two that I'm going to talk about. The one is you running through the snow. Which, of course, you know, in South Africa, we know nothing about. But what struck me as you were sharing that is the sense of wildness that, and that's also, I think, when you talk about ultra marathons, Cassandra spoke about, you know, being lost a little bit. And I'm just wondering if there is something about running or something about us as human beings that we've somehow got a bit tame. With all our urbanization and our more sedentary lifestyles, and what it is about is there something about being wild? So I think that's my first question. And then the second question is around, it's a kind of chicken and egg story, because you talked about mind and body, body and mind. So does running renew your mind and help strengthen your mind and your resilience, or does your mind help you do the running? You know, so I don't, it's
yeah, that's a difficult question. I'll take your second question first, if you don't mind. So I think throughout my life, my mind rules my body in terms of recovery of things. So if you cast your mind back to the cancer, the way I got through that was to use my mind, and I shut myself off. And I noticed Cassandra's nodding her head. I shut myself. I was very selfish. I became actually extremely selfish, used my mind to control everything that was going on. Yes, I was in pain. Yes, I was feeling depressed. Yes, it was a difficult time, but I just kept saying, I've got children, I have a husband, I have a life, I'm only 48. Why would I go now? You know, I've got to keep getting through this. And it was my mind that healed my body. I kept saying, I'm fine, I'm physically fine, there's nothing wrong, I'm going to get through this. And so constantly it was that. With the running, my mind heals. So I was told after my heart attack that I would never run again. In fact, the consultant in the hospital was really rude to me about it. She said, you're crazy to even think that you will run again. You've got to change your diet. You've got to do that. And she was really prescriptive about what she felt I had to do, all of which was nonsense, it turned out, because I don't take the drugs anymore. They took me off those, and I eat the same way as I've always eaten, and I exercise the same way as I've always exercised. So my mind again came into play, but my body got weaker because I got depressed. So I had to, it was a really difficult balance then to get your mind and body back on line, to get your to make you feel good. And that's when I pivoted into doing a year of working. And I never take a full-time contract, I never take full-time work, but I took a year of working away from home as well. I was traveling too, and so I just changed what I did, and for a year I did that, and then I got back into my running. So I just changed, and I think my mind must have done that as well, although I wasn't conscious of that decision. I don't know when I made the decision. So it's a very difficult balance, that. And then, of course, my body was then not good because I had a year away, and I had to start again. And that 2019 Race to the Stones was my comeback. I did a 50K. So, you know, it was tricky. And that climb back was quite hard because gone were my points for the UTMB, which I'd got in 2017. I wasn't going to be able to achieve that by the time I was 70, which was my original goal. Boom, I had to start again. And then boom, I got hit again because my vertebrae decided to, at the bottom, because I'm 70, it's an age thing, nothing else. The wear of the vertebrae, I've worn my vertebrae through at the bottom. And so again, I was told, you probably won't run again. So I ignored that as well. I sound like I'm I am. So to go to your other point, wild, okay. So I am wild. There is absolutely no doubt about it. I have a wild gene, and I was always getting into trouble for that as a child, and I got into trouble as an adult. And if I tell you I was the first woman to work on a North Sea oil platform, you'll know that I took that into work as well. And I worked for the police at some time, and I always did things that people said I couldn't do. So I've always had that wild streak, and I have 2 wild children. And luckily I married a wild husband. So we're a wild family, although we present ourselves as, you know, husband and wife and 2 kids. Well, we've now got grandchildren, but I hope they're wild too. And I think wildness is just something amazing that you have. And to go out, I mean, Wiltshire's not wild enough for me. I mean, I come from the north of Scotland. I need a lot more wild than Wiltshire, but it's good enough, okay? I can get out, I can be alone, I imagine things. I mean, I'm always telling myself stories. I just like the solitude, and that makes me believe it's wild. So yes, you're absolutely right. Well spotted. I couldn't have put it better myself. It is a wild thing, running, and we need more wild.
Yes, Cassandra, yeah.
Hi, Alison.
Hi.
Your story is so inspiring, and
Thank you.
And I just want to know, how old are you? You keep on saying that you're old, but you know, you give me the vibe that you are so young, and you look so young. So
Thank you.
Tell me,
Thank
how old are you?
Well, I was born in 1950, but you know, so I'm 70. I'm 71 this year. But the thing about but according to my Garmin, I am only 35.
Yeah! You
So I
are
have
35 for me.
Reversed my age,
God.
and my head says I'm 28.
Oh my God. Okay, I mean, it's like, I mean, like your story really inspires me, after all the things that you have gone through, you had cancer
Thank
and
you.
everything. It's like, wow. Thank you, Alison.
It's life. Lots of people have done this. It's just that I'm willing to talk about it. I'm the wildness that tells about it.
Thank you. Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.